Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast with Ani and Brian. Join us as we explore the art and science of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools to strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional. Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you'll understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence. If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi there, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast, episode 13. Hey there, Brian.
Hey, Ani, how are you?
I'm good. I've been thinking about something recently.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Should I get a somatic breathwork certification?
That's a good question.
I know. I thought maybe we could talk about it because people ask us this sometimes.
They do. When people call and ask, talking with you about the Somatic Coaching Academy, what kind of stuff we do here?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because somatics has kind of a large umbrella, right? And so breathwork is a part of what can or could be done from a somatic practitioner standpoint. And so people want to know, should I become a somatic coach? Should I become a somatic breath worker? I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of people who call have heard about these things and they're interested in them, but they don't really know what they are anyway. We actually love getting on the phone with people and talking with them about what they're really trying to get at, because not a lot of people really understand what they're trying to do with this work. And I get it, because sometimes people, actually a lot of times, I've probably done this too if I thought about it, get certifications and things that they've not really experienced on a personal level, but they've heard are really powerful practices and they haven't really experienced on the personal level. And so then they decide to go get a certification, which is fine. Part of the issue with that, though, when you haven't used it yourself, is there's just stuff you don't know. So I'm hoping we can clarify some of that in this podcast, because I know there are listeners who are considering, should I get a somatic breathwork certification?
Yeah, or become a breathwork facilitator or a breathwork coach, or there's all kinds of different ways that it's kind of talked about. So maybe first we can kind of clear up some of the semantics around it.
That would
might
be great.
Helpful first.
Yeah.
First.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that we're talking about somatic breathwork. I think is kind of fascinating.
You and I had the same thought.
Start with, right? Because so somatic is body oriented, body focused, has something to do with the body, and breath work obviously has something to do with the body.
So very body oriented.
Kind of funny that it's somatic breath work.
Yeah, it's almost like calling you Brian. Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah, we could try that. But there's nuances there, right? There are nuances that breath work is a somatic practice.
Sure.
But there are also other somatic practices.
So some breath work certification programs and facilitator programs don't call themselves somatic breath work. They just call themselves breath work, but it's still body in the body breath happening.
Exactly.
And then some do call themselves somatic breath work. It's been my experience that there is not a delineation there. You too?
In my experience too. I could be missing something.
I could be missing something.
If someone
more nuanced
is like listening to the podcast and they're like, wait, I'm a somatic breathwork facilitator.
And also
I'm not just a breathwork facilitator. And then like share, in the comments and those kinds of things, like what's cooking around the differences there. But the way we categorize it is that breath work is a somatic practice. And of course,
we do that in the core centering, program as a part of the core centering program, but we don't have a specific certification that is just for breath work. We'll probably talk a little bit more about why that is later.
Yeah. So we do breath work as a part of the core centering process, because breath work alone is really powerful, right? So we might ask that question. It's like, why is breath work so powerful?
Great question,
Great,
Brian.
Great question.
Let's talk about that.
And it is powerful in and of itself. And it's also has limitations if you're just doing breath work. by itself.
Sure. And sometimes it can be more powerful than you intend and can cause problems as well.
Right. So then the question is somatic breath work safe?
Yeah. Does it release trauma?
Yeah. And the questions are who should do breath work? Who should not do breath work? Right. It brings up all those kinds of.
It brings up a lot of stuff.
Brings up a lot of stuff.
Just like breath work.
Yeah, just like breath work does. So let's talk about why is breath work so powerful?
Yeah.
Well, breathing is this really interesting thing in the body because it is both an autonomic nervous system function, which means that if we're not thinking about breathing, we'll breathe. Our bodies will just keep breathing even if we're not thinking about it, right? And at the same time, we can consciously change our breath rate, our breath depth, where we breathe, whether it's high in our body or in the abdominal breath, or we can change all things about our breathing also consciously. So it's really an interface between our autonomic or automatic nervous system and our conscious nervous system, or you might even say it's an interface between the subconscious and the conscious mind. It's the interface that's most accessible to all of us. Now, there's other things that you can do through biofeedback. People can learn to consciously change their heart rate, consciously change their blood pressure, consciously change those types of things. Most people aren't going to be able to like consciously change their liver function or their gallbladder function or something like that. But breath work is the interface between the subconscious and conscious minds. But let's take mind out of it for a second, because we can have a whole debate on that. I think I'd love to do a podcast actually on the difference between the brain and the mind at some point in time, because there are distinct differences between those two things. I don't want to go off on that trip right now because we'd be here for a really long time talking about it. But let's talk about the brain. So the breath work has different effects on both the, let's say, the subconscious kind of control centers in the brain and also the centers of conscious awareness in the brain as well.
Another thing that's coming to, did you want to say anything else about?
I have a lot more to say about it, but I think that you want to.
I mean, I'm thinking just about the energetic body and how the breath is right in the middle of the body. And so, from a somatic perspective, a lot of people are trying to, a lot of people try to do somatic work so they can kind of get out of their head and get embodied or come from a different place other than just the somatic intelligence. And so when we talk about coming from a different place than the somatic intelligence, we then a lot of times think about the heart. We think about the gut. Those are the other intelligences that a lot of people know about. The whole body is intelligent and gives us an access point to unlimited intelligence. I'm just thinking about the breath being at the center point in the body. It's right around the heart, right? The lungs, and all that it has to do with the lungs and the heart function and the other body system functions. So the energetic body, kind of the metaphoric body, the physiological body.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what you just really brought up for me, Ani, is just that whole idea again of the energy body. And if we're talking about just energy, and let's just talk about physiological energy. Let's talk about ATP. ATP, right? Adenosine triphosphate, which is the foundational energetic battery of everything that happens in the body, is produced in mitochondria, which are these little organelles inside of your cells. And they're all day long, all day, all night, like producing ATP to run everything in your body. Well, breath is one of the primary, if not the primary, deliverer and producer of ATP. So when we're talking about just basic body energy, if we stop breathing, we stop producing energy. And if we change how we breathe, our body's metabolism changes. And that links back in with things like the hypothalamus. So the breath work, or our breathing wiring, if you will, goes directly, especially in our nasal cavities. So there's some really interesting stuff that happens in the nasal cavities. And this is why there's a whole other debate too we can have around nose breathing, mouth breathing. Do I breathe in through the nose, out through the nose? Or I breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and through the mouth, out through the right? I mean, where am I breathing in and out of? I mean, we can do a whole other 10 podcasts on that too. Let's just try to stay focused here on, should I get a breathwork certification?
Keep it simple there, Mr. Science Guy.
Right. So let's just focus in on that. So it's really interesting to happen up in your nasal cavities that have direct wiring into your hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is part of your brain. It's basically the carburetor of your body. It runs your metabolism in your body. And that information gets hooked in with other parts of your brain, like your hypothalamus, your periaqueductal gray. Insula has something to do when you're paying attention to how you're breathing. So there's all these kinds of things that happen. We know from research, though, when you just pay attention to your breathing, even when you're not changing your breathing at all, which is kind of a foundational part about breath work, right? You're just paying attention to the breath. Doing that alone actually changes function in the amygdala, in the part of the brain that is kind of like our smoke detector or our threat alarm in the brain. So just paying attention to the breath starts to change function in the amygdala, starts to down-regulate amygdala sensitivity, and also increases coordination in communication between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala is really part of our subconscious brain centers, and the prefrontal cortex is part of our conscious brain centers. So again, here's breathing having a connection between our subconscious and our conscious brain function. The prefrontal cortex has a lot to do with not only how we label and rationalize and plan and executive functions and things like that, but there's also some control over our body function. So when we're actually consciously controlling our breath, we're doing that from the prefrontal cortex as well as paying attention. Because one more thing about the prefrontal cortex is also what we call the watchtower of the brain. It's the part of the brain that kind of watches and witnesses what's going on in the body. So when we're doing practices like meditative or body scanning practices, our prefrontal cortex is activated to pay attention to what's going on. So even just paying attention to your breath is linking together all these amazing brain centers, which is starting to create better coordination between our subconscious and conscious minds, and also has some things to do with balancing our autonomic nervous system.
Well, I don't know, Brian. You're making a pretty darn good case for the fact that everybody should get a breathwork certification. Yeah. Let's go. So can I give you like my take on why I like breath work?
Yeah,
that was all very cool science stuff. My brain oftentimes thinks in terms of the feeling quality states, and breath work feels good. Mm-hmm. It does, though. I mean, I'm a busy mom, partner. I'm running a business. I am a busy woman, and let me tell you, laying down and breathing for a little while, I like it. Mm-hmm. I like it. And that is something that as a practitioner is very appealing to be able to do with our clients, to be able to give them an opportunity to just like what looks like lay down and de-stress. But can we just talk about how breath work gives other opportunities for Pandora's box to potentially be open? Yeah, can we talk about
breath work and trauma release?
Yeah, because it's not just laying down and feeling good. What you're talking about here is this intermediary between our conscious and our subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. And, you know, to me, like having this kind of awareness about being the intermediary between someone else's conscious and subconscious mind. Mm. You know, it reminds me if I went in the garage and I got into your dad's tools, you know, down the your dad has all these like tools all around the place.
Yeah.
Brian's parents live across the street. So that's for another episode on another day. So if I got in there and I messed around with your dad's tools, like I could cause a big problem. Like I could get into something that I don't know how to handle.
You could cause a big problem. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So that can happen when we do breath work in particular as a somatic practice. Like there's a bunch of somatic practices. I think somatic breath work can in particular be one that could cause some re-traumatization for people without trying, you know, like just because of that relationship with the subconscious mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we ask that question again, you know, should I become a breathwork facilitator or should I get a somatic breathwork certification? However you want to think about that. My next question is
Are you trauma
Are you
informed?
trauma informed? Are you trauma sensitive? Like, how does that work? I mean, you actually had a client reach out to you recently. Remember?
I did. I remember
asking you, should I go to this breath work? It wasn't even a workshop.
Brian,
it was like
Brian,
an event, right? A breathwork event.
I do. I'm putting my head in my hands here for a moment, and like if this is you, who's a person who's calling and asking us this question, please know that is like we love answering this question. So me putting my hands in my head. My hands in my head is because I can't believe, Brian, that people who are running breathwork certifications and many other kinds of certifications, therapeutic kinds of things too, all the time, we hear from people who say, I'm in this thing and I heard something about somatics. They mentioned somatics. They did a few hours of somatics in my breathwork certification or something like that. Do you think I should get, a trauma sensitive certification too? I'm like, oh my God, yes. I can't believe that programs aren't telling people that. Right, I can't believe that they're not partnering up and piggybacking with places like ourselves who offer trauma sensitive certifications, because you absolutely should. Listen to me. It's a little bit like the wild, wild west out there right now. 20 years ago, no one wanted to talk about meditation. 10 years ago, meditation started to become popular. 5 years ago, everybody's doing meditation. Holistic stuff right now is like the new best thing, but it is so much the wild, wild west. There really isn't the care so that we make sure that we don't do harm to people to talk about trauma. I don't think it's on purpose. I think that people just aren't aware that we really should be looking at these things in conjunction. As you talk about becoming a breathwork facilitator or getting a breathwork certification, also become a trauma sensitive practitioner. We, of course, would say a trauma sensitive coach, specifically depending on your line of work. But anybody and everybody can become a breathwork facilitator. Anybody and everybody can also become a trauma sensitive coach so that you're doing those things responsibly.
Yeah. So this is actually a really great segue, Ani, because we've talked about like just having a breathwork certification. For instance, if you're a breathwork facilitator, breathwork coach, breathwork healer, whatever you want to talk about it, then you're going to be able to do things with people with the breath. And by just working with someone's breath, you can either help to speed up their nervous system or slow down their nervous system. That's a core part of breathwork. So you're really teaching someone to do that. And of course, the risk we run is if there is undivulged or stored trauma in someone's nervous system, when we speed the nervous system up or slow the nervous system down outside of what's customary for that person or what they haven't done in a while, there's probably a pretty good reason they haven't done that in a while. And that's because their nervous system has contained something as out of bounds.
Absolutely.
Right. And so the person won't naturally do it because it's out of bounds. So if we're a breathwork and we take them across that boundary and without understanding what we are unlocking for somebody, you can end up with a lot of trouble.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. So that's like a good thing and a bad thing. So here's the bad thing about it is if we unlock something and we don't know what to do with it.
Totally. And one of the things that is a big soapbox issue for me, Brian, is when we unlock something and then the person has to deal with it and we don't know how to deal with it.
Yep.
Oftentimes practitioners refer that person to therapy, and therapy is great for certain things, but any given individual who is then said, you should go to therapy, thinks something's wrong with them. And just because we've unlocked something in the subconscious does not mean anything's wrong with us.
Right.
And by the way, we're not just 90% of people walking around out there have traumatized nervous systems. Okay, so let's do that thing that we do all the time. 90% of people are walking around with traumatized nervous systems. We're not just talking about you do a breath work practice with somebody and you could unlock a traumatic memory that they don't remember, because that can happen. We're also talking about the people, like you're saying, who are walking around, they know what happened, they remember what happened, but they're not dealing with what happened, or they've dealt with it and they're done, in quotes, right? How many people have we said have we worked with who thought they were done with things.
Sure, yeah.
They said, I've went to therapy for 20, 30 years or something, and they start to do somatic practices, and all of a sudden they realize they're not done because it hasn't been resolved in the nervous system.
Correct. Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah. And breath work is one of the fastest routes to make that happen, which is why typically in our core centering program, we don't start with breath work. We have a different way that we organize the material to warm the nervous system up, to create safety anchors, to be able to help ease in there so that we're doing this very smoothly, safely, and easily to be able to get a great effect. Now, the good thing about doing these somatic practices is that it does soften up someone's resistance to change if the resistance to change pattern has been locked in their nervous system for a long period of time. And that oftentimes is a result of some sort of trauma on some level in their nervous system. So, which is why we have those somatic practices as a part of our entire somatic coach training program.
Right.
Because when you use somatic practices to help soften up resistance to change, then you follow up with the coaching. Well, where if you don't have the skills to follow up with the coaching after you've opened something up for somebody, that can really leave somebody in a very vulnerable, destabilized, dysregulated position, and actually have a kind of a not so great outcome for people in a lot of ways.
Totally. So should you get a somatic breathwork certification, I would say that if you're not going to follow up and become a somatic coach, that you should work in very close referral with somebody who is. Because why on earth would you open up, really? I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Why on earth would you open up somebody's subconscious content and not even want to do something with it? Because it's gold to be able to open up somebody's subconscious content when you actually know how to coach and you actually know how to work with it.
Right. Yeah.
Do it responsibly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And this actually leads to another whole podcast that we're planning for some point in the hopefully not too distant future, is the idea around psychedelics.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just kind of talk about this for a second, that there's kind of a paradigm, if you will, or not a paradigm, kind of a hierarchy of this work. Right. And psychedelics is like the freight train to kind of opening up subconscious stuff. Breath work is kind of more like, I think I've heard this idea that psychedelics are kind of like the high-speed elevator.
Oh.
And breath work's kind of like the escalator.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but if you want to take the stairs, there's our somatic core centering practices, right? You're under more control. You are actually in charge. You can stop on the stairs if you want to at any time. You can kind of step to the side. You can take a break. Where if you're on an escalator or if you're on an elevator, once that thing gets going, you got to go along for the ride and you never know where you're going to end up.
I heard somebody, I can't attribute this to myself, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant. They said, just because there's an elevator there doesn't mean you should take it all the time. Because if you take the elevator all the time, we know what that does to our bodies. We should be taking the stairs most of the time and take the elevator sometimes. And I think when we talk about psychedelics or breath work, I think that's a really smart way to think about it. Do we even know how to take the stairs? I don't know. We see time and time again, people talking about traumas that have occurred in their lives because of, not just psychedelics or plant medicine, although I've seen that as well, or any kind of drug that you've taken or whatever. Really being able to empower your own physiology is true power. That really is true power.
Yeah. And
so I just want to highlight, we do teach breath work as a part of the core centering program. It's a part. And a big part of that program is helping to understand what the window of tolerance is and helping somebody to stay in it and creating safety so that you can do breath work and other somatic practices and be safe with anybody.
Yeah, we in the core centering program, we teach you kind of these 4 legs of the stool, if you will, of somatic practices. So that breath work is one of them. And when you understand how breath work fits in, again, with the matrix of these other practices, you can safely navigate people to a place where they can learn to consciously shift their own nervous system into regulated states, and also create it as an opening to be able to do deeper self-discovery work and deeper change work if that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really all done in a way where people have a great sense of self-agency through the entire process. Now, with all that said, we're not saying that all breathwork facilitators don't do that.
Absolutely.
Right, kind of thing. So when someone says, should I get a breathwork certification? My question is why don't you actually get a core centering certification? Because then you're actually getting even more than just the breathwork alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So listen, this is something we'd love to talk about with you. So if you're considering getting a breathwork certification or becoming a breathwork facilitator, you're not sure if you should do somatic coaching, also how it would fit, we have breathwork practitioners who study somatic coaching with us. I think we've also had a graduate go on to do breathwork certification, right? Because they've got that under their belt. So this is something to talk about with our team. So, go to our website, somaticcoachingacademy.com. You can look at the contact page, or you can just do /answer the call and have a call with our team. We'll help you map out your learning journey based on the things that you really want to do and who you are and what you have already in your bag of tricks and where you want to go so that you can really do awesome and safe work with people, because breath work is awesome.
Yeah, we love breath work. We do it ourselves.
So good.
We teach it. It's so very important. We just love it.
Yeah, do it responsibly. So I hope you learned a lot. I hope that you reach out to us if you have more questions about breath work, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself. Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.